Okay. Hello, everyone. I want to thank you guys again for joining our weekly workshops that we're having here on our SWAB Facebook page. If you've registered for this free workshop, we're going live every Monday on our Facebook page, just going over updates on how to prepare for job interviews, or different resume skills or interview skills that you can use during this kind of crazy time that we're living in with the coronavirus. Lots of employers are still looking for candidates, and a lot of candidates are still looking for job opportunities during this time. So if you are somebody who's looking for a job during this time, what these weekly sessions are going to do is just kind of make sure that you're prepared, and offer up some tips that you might have not known that you can learn and hopefully use the next time you have an interview, and hopefully you can use that and actually get the job. So again, if this is your first time joining us, my name is Alexander Florio. I'm one of the co-founders of SWAB. So what SWAB is, for those of you who might not know, it's a job app that we've created, but with a focus on higher turnover industries. But basically how the app works is you can download it. It's free to download, available for both Google Play and App Store users. You create a quick profile, answer a few simple questions, attach your resume, and then based on your location, jobs will appear. Now, similar to the dating app Tinder, I know this is a bit silly, but if you don't want to apply to a role, you would swipe left. And if you do want to apply, you swipe right. So it's really simple. Again, if you joined us last week, what we talked about was resume skills or different resume tips and things that you should and shouldn't include on your resume. Now, with these sessions, I want to keep them fairly short. I think probably between 10 to 15 minutes is a good time. I want to get to the point. I don't want to waste any time. And I just want to make sure that for those of you who do join us during these live sessions, that you do feel prepared and hopefully you learn something. So again, last week we talked about resumes, and this week I want to talk about interviews. So again, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are still looking for job opportunities, and a lot of employers are still hiring. So I know a lot of people think that no one's hiring at this time, but there are many employers that are still looking for candidates. Obviously with COVID-19, it's affecting pretty much everyone, employers and those looking for job opportunities. But I think there are some things that we need to keep in mind and recognize that, just because we're living in such a crazy time right now, things are still happening and you should still be prepared and make sure that you're not falling behind. So the first thing that I want to talk about with interviews is, I think it's becoming more and more normal now that a lot of interviews are done online. There's a lot of things that we can use, or a lot of tools that employers are using, like Zoom, like Skype, to actually have these interviews, but not actually be in person or have it where it's one-on-one. It is still one-on-one if you're doing it online, but it's not in person. And I think a lot of people think that, online might be easier. They might feel like there's a lot less pressure doing an online interview versus doing it in person. I think it depends on the individual. I think you still, even if you are doing something where it's online, you still need to be prepared. You still need to have solid questions to ask, and you still need to make sure that you're presenting yourself in a way that you would during an actual formal interview in person. And so I think, a lot of people might not be used to doing online interviews, and that's fine. I think, this is something that is an adjustment for most people, and we're all learning and dealing with how to do it the best we can. But one of the things that, I've learned or I've heard from users in the past, or people who have looked for jobs in the past, and even from the employers that I speak to constantly, is they'll do online interviews, and especially on the employer side, they feel like the candidate isn't prepared, and they in their minds think that because it was online, that candidate didn't take it as seriously or didn't present themselves in a way that they normally would have if they were doing it in person. And so there are many things that we need to consider when doing online interviews. And I think this is an obvious one, but I've heard from many employers who have said this, where they do an online interview and the candidate just isn't dressed properly and is not presenting themselves in a way that they should. And I know that it's easy to, think, it's online, might be a little more casual, but that's not the case. And I think, this is an obvious thing, but dress the part, dress appropriate. Make sure you're dressing for that online interview the same as you would if you were going in person. The employer still sees you. This is still a first impression for that employer. And I think if you're doing an interview where you show up and you're wearing just a t-shirt and it shows you didn't really care, you didn't, take a shower or dress up properly, or, make sure you look presentable, that's not at all going to help your case. So I know that, it might seem obvious to a lot of you that you should still be dressing up appropriately for an online interview, but a lot of people don't do that, and a lot of people don't really think it's necessary. So that's just something where keep that in mind. Employers are still judging you, and it's crazy, but your appearance is really the first thing that an employer will see, and it's really the first thing the employer has to judge on you. They're going to look at how you're dressed, and that's sort of the first judgment. So I think make sure you look presentable, and that will help your cause. Because if you go out there wearing just a t-shirt, it's not going to help your cause. And you want to make sure that you're looking really presentable and appropriate. Another thing too that we have to learn or sort of kind of adjust is when we're doing online interviews, it could be it's different because you're not really getting a full sense of, the individual who's interviewing you. You're not really learning about their kind of habits or their traits, and you're not really getting that sort of interaction. So it could be difficult to kind of, feel comfortable during these online interviews. So I think practice is really important, and practice is really important whether or not you're going for an interview in person or if it's online. But I think especially if you're doing an online interview, you still want to be prepared. So I think, sit with a friend, sit with a family member, sit with somebody who's going to, be able to actually help you when you practice for these interviews, and especially with a family member or a friend. Chances are they're going to be honest with you, and they're going to tell you where they think you were strong and where they think you can, use some improvement. So I think certainly take advantage of those around you and make sure you can prepare as best you can for that interview, because regardless if it's online or in person, you want to make sure you're prepared. You want to make sure that you know what you're talking about, and you want to make sure you can articulate your thoughts in a way where it's presentable and it captures the employer's attention. Because a lot of people just don't prepare. They don't know really anything about the company that they're interviewing at. And that's just these are interview skills 101. These are things that you should prepare and make sure you know going in. And I can tell you from my own personal experiences, I've gone for interviews where other candidates clearly didn't research the company. And I've had people come and interview with us at Swab. And that's one of the first things that I'll ask is, tell me a little bit about Swab and who are some of the companies that are posting roles with us, just to see if they've done their basic research on the company. And it's crazy the amount of times where people will sit there and you can start to see the nerves come through, where it's obvious they didn't check or it's obvious they didn't do any research, and they guess on the spot and they think that, that's appropriate, but it's not. And I think, for me, at least as an employer on that side, when it's me actually doing the hiring, if you can't say what Swab is, or it's obvious that you didn't do any research on the company, then that candidate is automatically there. There's no shot they're going to land that opportunity. And so if I think like that, a lot of other employers think like that. So you have to make sure that you do a little bit of research. You make sure you know a little bit about the company, because if you've done no research and the employer asks you a question about the company and it's obvious you haven't done any homework, well, you've just lost that opportunity and you're wasting your time during that interview and the employer's time, because, they're not going to hire you. That's just the reality. Also, I think it's important to have questions for the employer. So for an interviewer, or if you're going in for the interview, you want to make sure that you have a list of at least 2 or 3 really solid questions that you can ask the employer. And especially now too, given everything that's going on, I think it's important to know, as a job seeker or as a candidate, how the employer is dealing with COVID-19 and what steps they're taking to ensure that everybody's safe. So I think, those are questions that I think are appropriate to ask. And I think an employer, would look at a question like that and recognize that, the candidate's just looking out for their safety, and they want to make sure that if they do end up going to work somewhere, that employer is taking the steps to make sure that everything is safe and proper procedures are in place. But besides all of that, I still think you want to have a list of questions that you have prepared and that you can ask the employer. A common one that I hear a lot is, about workplace culture. And I think workplace culture is really important today. And especially for a lot of candidates, they want to know that if they are going for an interview somewhere, they want to know how that employer treats their employees, whether it's different incentives or different things that they're doing just to make sure that their candidate or their employees rather are feeling happy in the workplace, feeling like they're being recognized for the work that they're contributing. So a common question that is asked quite a bit is about workplace culture. So I think that's a fair question to ask. And I think you can ask an employer about their culture and what they have in place, because a lot of employers now take pride in having a great workplace culture. It's something that, that's a term you're hearing more and more of these days is, they want to make sure that people enjoy going into work and that it's a fun environment for everybody. Now, at the end of the day, obviously it's still work, but if a workplace has a fun culture where everybody gets along and it seems like they do things to keep morale up and make sure their staff are happy, that's appealing to a lot of people. It's appealing to me. And for SWAB, we want to make sure that the people we bring onto our team feel like they're able to contribute, feel like they're able to voice their opinions, and make sure that when they come into work, they know they're going to be respected and their input is going to be valued. So, that's one thing that I think a lot of employers are really stressing and really trying to work on is their culture. So I think that's something you can ask an employer during an interview. I think that's a totally fair question to ask. And I think it's something where the employer will recognize that it's something you care about and you want to be a part of that. So I think, right now, I want to cut the session. I think, we're at about 12 minutes, and I think that's a pretty good time. But there are many resources that you can look at and things you could do to prepare for an online interview. These are just some tips that I wanted to share with you to make sure that, regardless if you get called in for an interview and regardless if it's online or in person, you feel prepared. One thing that I want to mention actually is if you do get called for an interview or you are actively applying to jobs and an employer reaches out to you, I think it's appropriate ahead of time to find out if that interview is going to be online or in person. So make sure that you get that information from the employer and make sure that there are no surprises come interview day, because the last thing you want is to, show up to the workplace and find out that the interview was online, or rather be online all day waiting for that Zoom call to come in and find out that it's actually not in person and that it's not online and that it's in person. So I think just making sure you're well prepared and make sure you speak to the employer ahead of time to figure out all of that, I think is important. But I want to thank everybody for joining this live stream. We're at almost 15 minutes now. And again, like I said, I think that's a good time. I want to get to the point. I want to keep it simple. But we're going to be having these sessions every Monday. So if you want to join again next Monday, please feel free to do so. These will always be free. They're going to be posted on our Facebook page. So if you might have missed the session, you can go and check it out later on. And again, with SWAB, employers are still hiring. We're speaking to employers every day to make sure that we're finding them great candidates. So if you are looking for job opportunities, go check out SWAB. SWAB is free. It will always be free. We want to make sure that we're giving everybody who's looking for a job the best opportunity as possible. And one thing I will keep in mind, or one thing I want to mention, and it's for you to keep in mind, is if you are looking for job opportunities on SWAB, or regardless of where you're looking for opportunities, whether it's through SWAB or other job boards, take your profiles seriously, put in time, don't half-ass anything. Make sure, especially on SWAB, attach your own resume, because these are things that employers look for, and they want to make sure that you're taking time and actually putting in some effort. So please keep that in mind. It will only help your chances of getting an interview, at least, if you follow those steps and attach things like your own resume and fill out your profiles properly. I can't stress that enough. Employers are always looking for ones who are posting their own resumes. And on SWAB, We actually have a feature called Swab Verified Candidates. So a lot of candidates don't actually know about this, but this is more for employers. If you fill out your profile on Swab properly, you attach your own resume, you answer the questions properly, like you would see on Instagram or Twitter with a celebrity where there's that blue check mark next to their name, you'll actually get that check mark next to your name. You will become what is called a Swab verified candidate. And so what that means is when you apply to a job, for employers who see a list of candidates beside your name, they'll see that blue check mark. And it's a way to say to the employers, hey, look at this candidate first. So if you take those steps and you fill out or you listen to those steps and you do everything properly in your profile, you'll get that Swab verified check mark, and it will increase your chances of getting a phone call for an interview and will increase your chances on potentially landing employment. So please, I can't stress that enough. Make sure you follow those steps properly, and you should be well on your way to landing an interview. Now, I want to thank everybody for joining this session. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to our info email, and that is info, I-N-F-O, at swabapp.com, and that's SWOBAPP. Thank you for joining this session. I hope you all stay safe and have a great week ahead of you. And I look forward to seeing you. I look forward to seeing you again next Monday. Take care.